Hi guys, welcome to Rootstem, and in this video we're going to be painting up an orc Weirdboy. Welcome guys, thank you very much for clicking and watching the actual video. If you do like the content, please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button if you do want to see more. So in today's video we're going to be painting up a Weirdboy. I keep wanting to call him a Weirdboy Warped because that's what we kind of used to be, with different levels. But we're going to be painting up. It's quite a nice figure. Then my only concern with the figure is that it's Games Workshop Finecast, and if I'm honest, I cannot stand the Games Workshop Finecast. Thankfully, this is a commission. This is not something that I've purchased myself, so I'm not really having to look after the figure. It's very wobbly. They are not well made, if I'm perfectly honest, and they break easily on Finecast. So that's my little rant about a Finecast model. But we're basically starting off by spraying it up Mechanica Standard Grey, and we're going to be using the following paints. So this is the collection of paints we're going to be using in this particular video. We've got some old school Dark Angels green. I think you can actually get it's the one underneath Warpstone, but any dark green will do. And then we've got a really bright green, and I'm using Moot Green for that. What I'm going to do is use a wet palette, get them two blended up, and then of course use half an uncommon shade just to sort of bring it back down. So it's going to be quite light, and then we're going to bring it back down again. Normally I'd use contrast paint for that because it's quick and easy, but with this particular orc and goblins, I'm wanting the flesh to look a little different. We've also got some Emperor's Children and Genestealer Purple. I'm going to be airbrushing these onto the cloak area. Basically we're going to be going for some form of like random pattern cloak, something very psychedelic, because of course it's a Weirdboy Warped. It's going to be using the psychic powers. We've got Villagio Dead White Game Air. This is really the only white I like to use for an airbrush. That's going to be for creating some zenithal highlighting before we put a lot of the colours on. We are going to thin the colours down to make sure we've got a little bit of transparency going on, and it should help with some of the highlights. Rhinox Hide, Doomball Brown and Agrax Earthshade. We're going to be using that combination for some of the leather straps. Mainly that, followed by a highlight of that, and then just washed over with this. We've also got, behind the oak there, we've got Carrick Stone, Ushabti Bone and Seraphim Sepia. Carrick Stone's going to go because he's got a bit of a elder icon on his chest. That's going to be Carrick Stone. Ushabti Bone, of course, is going to be for the bone items, and then we're going to wash those with Seraphim Sepia, and then highlight possibly with the same colour again over the top. I do have some Mechanicus Standard Grey and Administratum Grey. That's mainly going to be for the uniforms on the grots. They're just going to be like a standard grey sort of fatigues. I am still trying to keep that Blood Axe feel because it is a Blood Axe commission, but again we're just trying to keep it, just make it stand out with the psychedelic colours. I've also got some game colour. This is Tinny Tin, and it's quite an old one. As you can see, it's breaking up, but you can still get hold of that with some Narlacic Oxide, I think that's how you pronounce it. That's really good for sort of like giving that sort of really old copper brass sort of feel, which is what we're going to be doing some of the metal areas, such as the bells and these balls on here. That's going to give us the feel of something that's a conductive material. That's the idea behind it, at least. Of course, we're going to use a metal. I'm not going to paint here. That's just going to be whatever metal you're using plus like a black shade. And then we've got this. This is scale colour, and this is matte flat black. Now this is going to be used for the tyre, and the reason I use this for the tyre is because it has no real, once it's dried, it's got no real reflective properties at all. So it doesn't look like a normal black, it looks like old rubber, which I think on that particular tyre is going to look pretty, it's going to look pretty classy, to be honest with you. Right, let's get cracking. So we're going to do a zenithal highlight with white to begin with. Now, white, I even still put a bit of flow improver in. It can be really awful. It can spray it. Oh, it's not the greatest. I'm having to pick the figure up because it keeps falling over. I'm keeping the nozzle off so I can make sure that the tip is clean all the time, and I'm basically just going to pick spots to actually highlight. So his knees, his stomach, the bits of the face maybe on an angle, just little tiny bits that we're just going to highlight and make sure that they are going to get, well, we've got greater colour on it than the rest of the model. So the second colour we're adding is going to be Gene Stealer Purple. We're just going to be basically trying to concentrate this on the cloak as best we possibly can, or any sort of item of, well, clothing really. So the next colour we're going to be getting is Emperor's Children. I know I keep having the figure off because it's unbalanced on this particular stand, so I'm having to keep it just on that stick. Now, this is going to be done in spots, so I'm kind of just going to... Nope, that was too hard. So I'm just kind of randomly adding it to areas. No, I think this might be a bit too thin. But if you can, make it slightly thicker concoction. Make sure that you've got it down to 20 psi. And just kind of create some patterns. Just like as if you're making a psychedelic camouflage. Right, so now I'm going to use a colour I completely forgot to mention, which was actually Laughlin Blue. This is going to be added again, just in little spots. Just to add to the psychedelic colour that we've got going on with the actual cloak. Now, unfortunately, it fell off my stand, so I'm just going to do this bit and get it glued back on. Again, we're going to do kind of random spots and stripes if we can. Try to be very gentle. We've got it quite close, so you just need to make sure you concentrate and come back on if need be. There we go. And just make sure you've got your handy toothbrush so you can make sure that the tip is clean. Right, crack on. Right, next up, we are going to be doing some Mechanicus Standard Grey. So this is going to be done on all the cloth that's not part of the actual jacket. So kind of like, if you can see from there, I'm kind of like going to be doing just repainting back in those trousers. I've thinned it down a little bit thinner than normal. That's mainly due to the fact I want it to flow into certain areas, but I don't want it to really, I want it to have the ability to be able to have that nice zenithal highlight that we've applied to be able to show through. And of course all the Gretchen are going to be covered. Their trousers is standard, so we're trying just if we can to do one finish coat. We're not wanting multiples because we're wanting the brightness to show through. Although if we do need a couple of thin coats for whatever reason on the, say for example you've overspilled a particular colour, then you can do. Just make sure that when it comes to the highlighting we're gonna get it right. So just work your way through all the components and come back to my video. Next step, add a little bit of the admin grey into the wet palette. Make sure that you're getting, you know, a good mix. I'm using a small base brush at the moment. Small basing brush. It's one of my favourite brushes to use. I don't really try and use anything big. And then just kind of go around your greys that you've done and just give them a little highlight. We are going to be, I'm only mixing, it is thin as well, so it's mixed at about 50-50-ish. And we're just picking out the bits and leaving recessed shades. So kind of like the back of those trousers there. It's mainly on these guys. If it's still a bit wet, don't worry about it, but just picking up certain things. You know, if it's actually a little bit wet, it's not too bad because it actually works quite well. It kind of flows and you get a decent look and feel. Just believe in the edges and the deepest recesses. And then when that's done, some more, all nice and thin. And this is where you're going to be doing an edge highlight. If you want to use a thinner brush, you can do. I'm just going to be using the same brush. I'm just going to be picking out little bits that I'm after. Not going to be huge. And once you've done that, just let it dry. And if you think it needs another reinforcement, just go back in with the thin down admin grey, because when it dries it will be thinner. When it dries it will be darker than when you initially put it on. So don't forget that. So you can come back in and you can just do another pass. Because of course it'll still be nice and dry, nice and wet on that wet palette. It'll not dry it out. So you're still good to go. And then after this, we're going to be looking at doing something similar to the flesh. Right, so next up I'm going to be using the Dark Angel Green. Now I've already started applying it. It's quite thin already out of the bag, but of course if whatever colour green you're using isn't, then you can just use the wet palette to of course thin it down. I already had a test there on the gobbo, and we're just going to paint it up on the oak. Just make sure that you try and get into all the creases and recesses, and then we're going to start mixing it with the moot green. We're going to do that on a wet palette. Right, so the next step is mixing moot green and Dark Angel Green. I'm going to be doing that on the wet palette. I've already done one layer already. This is actually the most time consuming bit because you've got to keep layering it up. Both paints are quite thin. So just keep applying it to the area. And of course it's on a wet palette, so it is going to be a bit thinner as well. Just remember that when you are putting it on, it does dry darker than your initial application. Eventually it will get to a point where it looks fine, but just keep putting it on there. I'm using a small basing brush, and I'm using a really tiny, it's a 3/0 brush from, this is just a pure red sable brush. It's just a cheap brush, to be honest. And I'm just trying to carry on with the contours of certain faces. We're just trying to get a nice bit of wet paletting done on the oak skin. And this is, like I say, it's going to be most time consuming. You're probably going to have to put a good couple of layers on, maybe 5, 6, just to be able to get the look that you're actually after. I'm going to go for a lighter green, and then eventually we'll put the moot green on pure. And don't worry if you get striations, but just keep your brush, because it is quite wet, so just keep your brush clean as best you possibly can and try and keep yourself with a good thin tip. Your wet palette should keep it nice in between applications, but because it's quite, I've actually thinned it really thin, it can take time to dry, so I just need to clean that out. So as you can see, we've got skin coming on. This is a couple of layers of that concoction, and now I'm going to basically pure moot green, thin down with a very small brush, and we're just going to try and hit some edge highlights. Again, it's thin, so it'll just catch the edges what's needed. It might need to be thinner. You want it watery because it needs to have transparency, because you need to do this a couple of times. Make sure that the small brush that you're using is a little bit disposable. I find that if you use really thin paint, it can wreck it a little. A nice fine point. Don't forget, going to come back a couple of times. Just make sure that the paint is quite thin. We're wanting that transparency that you get, similar to like an airbrush, I suppose. So apply it, check it, come back to it if need be. So back to the orc. I'm going to be using the contrast red. I've already just gone ahead and used some sort of filler on the mouths. And what we're going to do is I'm going to keep that as it is. I'm just going to fill the mouth with the contrast red so that it kind of gets the gums, and then we'll come back in. We can always come back in and do the teeth later. Just fill the mouth, contrast red. That will actually get into all the little nooks and crannies of the mouth, inside the gums, as it were. And then what we're going to do is to use contrast red on the brain bit on top, because I'm wanting that to look different. I'm not wanting it to be the same as the rest of the orc skin colour. Again, when you use a contrast paint, don't use too much. Make sure you can pull it away. This brush also needs cleaning. You've never seen. And then, like I say, right, so we're just going to go onto the head. That'll give us the idea. If you wanted a bit of an exposed brain, it's like an old school Martian. Now, contrast can take some time to dry, so let's get cracking with other things. So next up on the orc, we're going to need to paint up some of the silver. And once we've painted up the silver, I want you to go and use whatever blacking. I'm going to be using known oil, currently using lead belcher. So from a wet palette, just to make sure it's running nice and thin. If you need to go over it a couple of times, do so. Using an old brush as well, because I want to try and get it painted quickly. Don't forget the steel toe caps, especially on the other orcs. And once we've done all this, we'll come back into it, and we're going to be possibly painting quite a lot of basic stuff ready for highlighting. So we've got the silver down. I've already inked it with the known oil, so that's actually drying at the moment. I will probably highlight this at the moment with some Stonewall silver or some lighter silver in a second. I'm going to be doing several colours together because we're going to be putting washes on top of them in a moment. So I'm going to be doing all the teeth and the bones. We're going to be using your shabty bone. Sorry for the arm. So I'm going to get all of that put onto that particular figure. And the shabty bone is applied, just applying it to all the sort of teeth and bone areas. While that's drying, we're going to go on to the next step, which is going to be Rhinox hide. Now I'm going to be putting Rhinox hide onto all the strappings, anything that kind of looks like leather. That's going to be applied onto that section. So in continuing to do the little things, we've got the bone done. I've also made sure that that is actually done with Ulthuan Grey. That's the gemstones, the bits that are from the Eldar sides of things. And we're going to be using Tinny Tin. I know you can't really see the label because of course it's cracked off. But I'm just going to put a little bit of this into my wet palette. And this is the bit where I'm going to, that'll be fine. We're going to do this on all of the metal plates. So there's like little bits of metal plates. There's bells, the ball bits on the end of this. We're going to kind of try and make it look like a coppery like feel. So that it's like a conductive material. The idea is that rather than in a standard metal, they use this sort of darker copper to focus the York's power. That's the idea. I'm going to get all that painted up and then we're going to start coming in, we're going to start inking stuff. So we've got the tinny tin, we've got the bone, we've got the brown. I've even put the grey in there for the elder elements, and I've just put a little bit of red on the gems. I'm going to use some Mournfang brown. I'm going to use a really thin brush, and we're just going to highlight all the leather strap areas. If I can use that new brush. We're going to highlight all the leather strap areas before we put some washes on. Or shades, as Workshop likes to call them now. I still call them washes. I'm not quite sure. Put a comment below if you still call them washes. Because I used to call, well, to be honest, I used to call it inks. And if anyone remembers the old Golden Demon 9 box set, you used to be able to get an ink set. So this is basically going to be, when it comes to highlighting the leather, I tend to sort of just go with where the sun is going to be. So it's just basically just highlighting strips that are nearest the top. I don't really put a lot of edge highlighting in. Sometimes I like to run it just into the middle. You might have to go over it twice with it being a thin paint, because you might not get all of the highlights showing through once it dries. Don't forget your other models if you've done some more strips on those. So let's get these washes on now. We've got Seraphim Sepia. Seraphim is going to be put onto the grey, including sort of the red and all the bone aspects. Just to make you guys aware, I did actually highlight the silver. And I don't know why I just didn't that. And the Agrex Earth shade is going to go on to all of the, it's going to go on to the leather parts, and then I'm going to use some Nifalac, that one, oxide. That's going to go, I'm going to try and put that into the recesses of all of this sort of brassy stuff. And then what I'll probably do is to use a dry brush and then just go over that just to try and take the excess off, so that's just leaving it in the recess. I'm going to do all three together because while I'm recording this, it's quite late at night. So if I actually do that now in the morning, it'll be done. So the figure's coming along quite nicely now. We've let a lot of the bits dry. I've actually just painted the eye in with some spirits here because I'm going to be going in with possibly some blue to try and make it look like he's got some form of psychic power eye. That didn't come out right, did it? I have put some of the black into here. I'm just using an older brush so that we can paint up the tyre. The tyre does not going, it's going to be such a matte black that you'll not need really. I'm only using this particular brush because I want to get a large surface. I will go in with a smaller brush to get into the edges. But that particular black from Green Stuff World, it does dry very, very matte. Right, so paint that up, let that dry, and we're going to be nearly done with this. We've only got a couple of things to do. Now I'm going to use the colour Telesar Blue. I don't think I mentioned this colour to begin with. I think I've used quite a bit of colours I didn't mention to begin with. That's mainly because as I'm painting sometimes, I go a bit cray-cray. And I'm just putting that into the orbital socket. And it's the same with the orbital socket up here. I'm going to need a different brush for that one. And then of course I'm just going to paint the eye with a red, the other opposite eye, and the Gretchen eyes with a red dot, and I think we're nearly completion on this. And if I'm honest, we're done. Look at him with his tyre. I'm going to varnish him up now and get him back to his client once this disease has gone. Well, thank you very much for watching, guys. Please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button if you want to see more. I will be putting out more painting videos, of course, due to the fact that we can't get together to have battles. I am going to see if I can get some other type of gaming going on there, but at the moment I'm mainly playing first-person shooters, and that just seems to be a lot. But yeah, try if you can to support us. I'm trying to get my website back up and running as well while we're off. Right. Thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you next time. Hopefully next Friday.